The BumbleKast is for entertainment purposes only. The host's comments and opinions, and those of their guests, are wholly their own and do not represent that of any other entity. Content is provided as is, with no guarantees of accuracy or timeliness.
It's a BumbleKast Mini, sponsored by Oddly.
Some fans feel a high-energy protagonist's charisma can come across as arrogant due to wording. Since you work across multiple mediums with a character such as that, how could you approach keeping confidence fun and likable as future stories develop?
Part of it's going to just come down to individual interpretation. Folks will read into the material whatever they want to. There is a certain balancing act to be found in how a character words things, overly aggressive dialogue or pointedly insulting things might lose that fun to them, but that also depends on the character. Like Spider-Man is quippy and he can be a little pointed, but he's also up against bad people, so we kind of laugh along with him. It's what is the line for some people doesn't register for others, and you can't account for everybody.
Sometimes certain aspects of a long-running character's past portrayal, especially moments that didn't land well with some fans, can stick in perception for years even after creative direction has evolved. How do you take that legacy perception, whether positive or negative, into account when shaping future characterization? And what helps you decide what to reinforce familiar traits? And what helps you decide when to reinforce familiar traits versus refresh tone so the character's voice stays well-balanced going forward?
Well, ultimately, that comes down to the license holder. I try to understand whatever property I'm working with, but it is up to the license holder and whoever's overseeing the project to make sure everything is on brand. So if I am producing a product that is, working for them, then that is how they want their product portrayed at the time. I like continuity. I like paying attention to the past, especially in something that's narrative or character driven. But there comes a point where you have to pick up and move on. If you try to pay credence to every single step along the way, you become so bogged down in minutia that it's obtuse for anyone trying to jump on, and it hampers what you can do with the characters. I mean, to cite Spider-Man again, are we going to acknowledge all 80 years of everything he's ever done or said? No. It's not tenable.
Are we going to keep referencing and swearing by that one thing that most of your readership seems to absolutely loathe? Speaking of Spider-Man. Or not? And apparently the answer is yes, they will. They will keep that in there. Yeah. When writing a long-running, assertive heroine whose personality has been portrayed differently across mediums, some recent versions have connected strongly by giving her more energy and agency, while others have viewed it as too toned down and mundane. As you develop future stories with her, how could one ensure her personality stays dynamic and well-rounded so she continues to feel engaging and true to her character?
Again, that's up to the license holder. They decide how characters are written and portrayed. Like, this is a dated example at this point, which makes me feel really old. But like, if I had been doing something with Rise of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, which took some very drastic new directions with the characterizations, and said, hey, I would prefer to lean more towards these other versions, the answer would be no. Mm-hmm. This is the direction for the characters. This is how they are portrayed. This is how you write them and move on with them. And ultimately that was for the better, as we saw. But the initial shock that we had with Rise, I believe, was understandable, but I see where they were going with it now. So any freelance writer who is working on other people's properties has to do the best they can to work within the parameters they're with and hope that they reach the broadest possible audience. But you will not appease all the people all the time. Some folks have their preference for the character one way or the other, whether it's their personal headcanon or based off of other interpretations over the years, and you can't thread that needle every time.
Over the past several years, there's been noticeable growth in how a long-running, action-driven franchise handles its core hero and supporting cast. Even with that progress, fans still debate characterization, tone, and direction. When your writing becomes the center of those conversations, how do you reflect on earlier choices and use that perspective to guide future portrayals in ways that build more confidence and trust from the audience?
I try to look back on how I've worked within the parameters I've had to work in to see where my own tendencies lie and learn from that. But especially with licensed material, the audience can't shape the direction that I take. Quite literally, I have to work within the bounds of what the licensor holds. Doesn't matter how sweeping or nuanced it can be. One example that comes to mind is the Minecraft story I did for the compilation that Dark Horse put out years ago. It was a silent comic, so the script that I wrote was just stage direction for the artist. But for lack of anything else, I named the protagonist Steve because that was the name of, what you call your main Minecrafter guy, the initial skin. I wasn't aware of any characterization or greater purpose to Steve. He wasn't ever actually named Steve in the comic because it was silent. Still got a note back saying it can't be Steve. Steve is this character. I'm like, oh, his name's David now. Cool, approved. So there's funny stuff like that.
You should have named him Jack Black.
That would have made the story very, very different. There's also the discussion to be had over, stories and properties that are meant to perpetuate a brand versus stories that are free to grow and evolve and reach a conclusion. And there are certain arcs that can be compared, but they are very different beasts. A franchise that is built to perpetuate a singular idea, a singular version of the brand in perpetuity can only stretch so far, and you've got to find a way to reinvent the wheel over and over and over again. Some folks are fine with that. They enjoy that episodic and repeated storytelling. Others want more from it, and I get that, but that's not what the project is. If you want something that has a beginning, middle, and end for characters to grow and develop and change, you have to look for that kind of story somewhere else where that is the objective of the project.
Humor is an important part of an energetic hero's personality, but occasionally those frequent quips or overly wordy reactions can come across as forced or distracting, especially when references or jokes are echoed repeatedly. How do you determine what kind of comedic dialogue fits the moment so it supports the character's charm without overwhelming the tone or undermining the emotional weight of key scenes? Would reducing these benefit you as a writer and the audience?
Depends on the scene and the moment. Some jokes land for some folks, some don't. And humor is highly subjective. I think that it can be used in action sequences to benefit them. Like, first thing that kind of springs to mind for me is the first Matrix movie when Neo is on the run towards the end of the movie. He's being tracked down. Is it Tank who's talking to him? God, it's been so long. Operators talking to him saying, take a left. Neo bounces off the wrong door. Your other left. And I distinctly remember the entire theater erupting in that because it was this momentary break in tension. It was so intense. We were engrossed in Neo getting away. We didn't want to laugh at his plight, obviously. We're fearful for the character's survival, but it had reached such an intensity at that moment that one momentary break allows you to release and the tension can ramp up again immediately. It isn't just nonstop. So little moments of levity are good in dramatic scenarios if timed properly. Whether I have nailed that landing every time in 20 years, I can't say for certain. Probably not. But that's up to the reader to decide for themselves.
Many fans connect most with a hero when his emotions speak louder than his words. Yet there are moments where continued or lengthy dialogue might lessen the impact, and a pause or simpler delivery could feel more authentic. How do you decide when to hold back and let silence or subtly carry the emotion so key scenes lands with full weight rather than feeling detached or overly talkative?
Again, entirely depends on the scenario. I really like using visuals, especially in comics, to do the storytelling. And that relies quite heavily on the artist to convey those thoughts the same way I'm thinking. And I have been very fortunate to work with numerous artists who can do that. But sometimes you just need to spell it out to the audience. I've had scenarios where we're building towards something, and what I have seen is that the audience just doesn't get it, despite what we have done in the storytelling so far. So, okay, I'm going to say, here you go. This is what we're saying. We've had to remove all the artistic influence. Here are the words that you're supposed to understand, and it still doesn't land. So there's only so much you can do. So one of the lessons I learned from that particular scenario that I'm thinking of is I need to be concerned less with appeasing the loudest detractors on the internet and just focus on telling the story. If I and the art team can tell the best story that we can and reach the widest possible audience, and once again, staying within the parameters of whatever licensed project we're working on, that's the best anyone can hope for.
All right. I've heard that certain characters' dialogue increasingly reads like it's written for the fans, packed with callbacks, pop culture style references, or over-elaborating phrasing, rather than staying true to the character's natural voice and situation. How do you approach writing dialogue that prioritizes character authenticity and story moment over fan-targeted styling?
When I write, I think of it as method acting. I try to get into the head of each character and write them as they would speak in the scenario that they're in. But I also have to be the third person omniscient director to all this. I have to know where the plot is going. I have to be able to steer the characters in a certain direction. And finding that balance can be tricky. But 9 times out of 10, the direction is what are the characters? It's trying to get the characters to talk and act as they would in that scenario. Now, sometimes I've pushed for the joke or for the reference because I found it amusing. I thought it would go over well. Sometimes it lands. Sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes it works for most people. Sometimes it works for not most people. It really is going to vary on the moment-to-moment thing.
In a long-running ensemble franchise, different stories highlight different strengths among the supporting cast. Sometimes a proud rival's confidence can tip into hostility, or a formidable recurring adversary might lose impact if defeated too easily. How do you ensure each major character maintains consistent agency and threat level so the ensemble continues to feel strong, engaging, and balanced?
In something that is existing in perpetuity, it's very, very difficult. Some characters exist to be jobbers, unfortunately, and that's their role. And yet you still have to make them feel like a credible threat. Finding targets that said character can antagonize to show that, on their own, they are quite a powerful force. But our heroes who regularly confront them are on another level, and thus we have this regular outcome to the conflict because that's how it always has to end. There is a certain fatalistic approach to it. The brand says X must defeat Y. It's going to happen. And you just do your best to find a way to make the journey there entertaining and not worry too much about the metacontextual analysts or the folks who are looking for a greater progression because it doesn't exist. It's not going to happen.
But are we talking about Mega Man? You said X versus Y. So maybe we're talking about Mega Man.
I mean, with Mega Man, with classics specifically, there is such a rote formula that it can be tiresome, but because it is so lighthearted, there's a charm to it. We accept it. We kind of want to go through the beats again because that's what's familiar and comfortable. With X, it's almost a little frustrating because there is that hint of progression, but then there's Sigma again.
Yeah.
Hi, Sigma. He's a different form. He's degraded, something, whatever. But it's Sigma because it always has to be Sigma. So,
right.
And those are franchises that want to make sure that it's accessible to everyone who's heard of Mega Man. Oh, I know Mega Man. He fights that Einstein guy, Dr. Willie or whatever. I want to see him shoot lemons.
Dr. Wily.
Yeah, you're doing that, but you're also appealing to the core audience who maybe wants to see something other than Wily. There's Mr. X. What a fresh new it's Wily.
It's always Wily.
Oh, cool. Dr. Cossack. What a neat new villain. He's controlled by Wily.
I mean, to be fair, the stories mostly serve the gameplay. They're just kind of set dressing for games. They didn't really put too much thought into it at the time, I guess. Too much. Maybe a little later on as things evolved, but even still, they're action games. They're not really meant for having in-depth storylines. So, you know how it is.
you can cheat a little with franchises like Ninja Turtles or X-Men, where they are frequently rebooted in different media. How many different turtle cartoons have we seen? And the core principles are there. The Four Brothers, you got Splinter, you got Shredder, yada, yada.
Sure.
And some of them are more heavily remixed than others, so that when you hit certain points that are familiar, they can sometimes be used to great effect, where it's like the farmhouse in upstate New York. That's kind of like synonymous with this is where they rebond and search their souls and come back stronger. It's been used multiple times in different Turtles media.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not necessarily this is the plot beat we have to hit because it's a turtle story,
Right.
Whereas in some X-Men stuff, what were we watching years ago? I think it was Wolverine and the X-Men.
Mm-hmm.
And a particular character showed up, and I remember Aaliyah just rolling her eyes going, oh, here we go, more Phoenix bull crap. I was like, maybe they'll do something a little different. No, it was more Phoenix.
No, it was more Phoenix, yeah.
It's like, here's this character, they have to do this again. It's like, no, because we already know that story. So it can be to its benefit. You can use that meta understanding of the recurring elements to its benefit, but it is also a very easy trap to fall into. And then when you have other franchises that do not evolve and are, consistent for decades at a time, it's more about the individual experiences than the greater whole, I guess.
Mm.
And I could be completely wrong. This is my personal opinion from what I've experienced. There are probably a dozen other ways to approach it by different writers. I'm not going to say this is the way to do it.
This is the way. Or is it? Ba-ba-ba. In some instances across certain scenes, the dialogue can sound more like hearing the writer's own speaking style or opinions rather than the character's natural voices. How do you approach making sure each character's tone and personality guides what they say, so the writing feels authentic to them rather than sounding like commentary from outside the story?
Again, I try to get into the characters' heads so that whatever they are saying or doing is logical to them personally. There's also the need for the story to progress a certain way, so there have been times where I've been putting a story together and it's like, okay, I need the character to go from point A to point B. Why would they do that? Why wouldn't they do something else entirely? Why wouldn't they think of this? Why wouldn't they subvert that expectation? It's like, they wouldn't. This doesn't make logical sense for the character. And I've thrown out the idea and approached it from another direction. There's also been times where the licensor has come in and said, this wouldn't happen, or the character wouldn't do this, or it has to end this way. And it's like, okay, what are the mental gymnastics I have to perform for this to work? Because it has to get approved to see the light of day. So how do we do this? And I've had great fortune to have a number of editors who have been able to say, well, what if we did this? Or what if we looked from this direction? What if we revised it this way? And it's like, yes, marvelous. Don't look too hard at it, but it works.
All right. One last question. In any large franchise, writing for multiple mediums means the final performance can vary a lot depending on voice direction, context, and editing. Moments written as energetic or casual can sometimes be interpreted as abrasive or out of character depending on how they're delivered. Would it be possible for you to collaborate with the performance and direction teams to help ensure that the intent of a line comes through clearly and maintains character appeal?
I would love to be part of that process. It very, very rarely happens. There are so many moving parts. There are so many people involved with their own input at any given point that adding one more cook to the kitchen is not really desired. So I have made it clear I am always available. I'd love to help and contribute, but there sometimes just isn't enough hours in the day to coordinate all that. And some folks just don't want that extra attention, or not extra attention. They don't want that extra input when they're already trying to meet their own deadline and meet their own approvals and get all this stuff done.
All right. Well, that's all we got for this BumbleKast Mini.
Thank you to Oddly for sponsoring this BumbleKast Mini. If you want one of your own, head over to patreon.com/BumbleKast, Ko-fi.com/BumbleKast, or become a YouTube member. Be good to yourselves, be good to each other, and we will see you next time on the BumbleKast.
Catch you later.